Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to hear that music being played in these hallowed halls again. Oh, excuse me for the feedback. My name is Leslie Jones. I'm the Director of Museum Affairs and Chief Curator for the Preservation Society. And we're so pleased to welcome you to our first Gilded Age music program. We're thrilled to welcome the Gilded Age Orchestra of Newport, who've joined us tonight, and look forward to hearing more from them very soon. I'm interested to know, how many of you have actually watched the Gilded Age on HBO? Okay, good. We're in good company here. Excellent. Well, you might remember from the finale of season 1, Gladys Russell's debutante ball. Well, meet their orchestra. This group of musicians played in the room directly behind you, in the music room here at the Breakers, which acted as Gladys Russell's ballroom for their New York house. And we have been so fortunate as an institution and as a community to welcome HBO here to film season 1 and season 2. And we are in great debt to one of our guests tonight, Steve Feinberg, who's joined us. He's the executive director of Rhode Island Film and Television Office, and it's Steve's hard work that brought that production here to Newport. So we just want to thank Steve for all of his continued efforts on that. This evening's program would not be possible without you being here in attendance and your support through tickets, and as well as our friends on Zoom. Thank you for joining us virtually. We're glad we can reach out not only to our local community, but to our extended national audience as well. Before I formally introduce the orchestra, I just want to let you all know that we have just released our newest lecture series that will be beginning this spring. It's called The Gilded Age Years, Transforming America, and it's a 6-part series that will take us on a journey through the era that gave shape to the country we know today. So we look forward to having all of you join us for those 6 wonderful lectures coming up. The first one kicks off on April 13th, so you will be able to attend both in person and Zoom, as is our tradition now. We'll also be offering not only individual tickets, but a bundle package in case you're really diehard and want to make sure you attend all 6. There's value to be had, so be sure to check out newportmansions.org for those tickets, which are now available. But back to our Gilded Age Orchestra of Newport. We're very pleased to welcome back Dr. Mark Stickney and Dr. Christopher Brellochs, who, if you've been following us, you may have also seen them last summer as presenters as part of the Pamela and David B. Ford lecture when they discussed melodies of the Gilded Age. But tonight, they brought their orchestra with them. Both Mark and Christopher are prolific scholars in historical music in America. Mark was appointed the artistic director of the Seacoast Wind Ensemble in 2016, and throughout his 20-year college teaching career, he has held conducting, brass teaching, and music education positions really across the country, and even here locally at the Community College of Rhode Island, as well as Salve Regina University. Closer to home, hopefully many of you are familiar with Historic Music of Newport, which Mark is the founding director of, and it celebrates and preserves the rich musical heritage of Newport, Rhode Island, which there is far more than I realized there ever was. So we're really proud of Mark in those efforts, especially because he's also one of our beloved colleagues and works with the Preservation Society in our Special Events Department. I want to also acknowledge all of our staff that worked to bring this performance together, in particular Kate Pedersen and Claire Barneywalt from our Museum Affairs team, and Phil Pelletier and Mark Malkovich, who also helped us with their musical knowledge and guidance in directing this program. Yes. Dr. Christopher Brellochs portrayed composer and conductor John Knowles Paine in episode 4 of The Gilded Age and assisted the production team with the historic accuracy of the scene. Christopher has lectured and performed internationally and in historic mansions including Lyndhurst, Olana, Montgomery Place, Crawford House, and Boscobel. He maintains Music of the Gilded Age, which is a Facebook and Instagram page where he shares his research. As a saxophonist and conductor, Christopher has performed everywhere from Birdland and Carnegie Hall in New York City to Paris, France, and Zagreb, Croatia. He is Dean of the School of Music at SUNY Schenectady and an adjunct artist in music at Vassar College. And of course, again, tonight wouldn't be possible without the orchestra itself. Many of our orchestra members are from Rhode Island, but some have also joined us from California, Michigan, and Minnesota. So we are eternally grateful for your time and also your efforts. Our sincere thanks to orchestra manager and clarinet player Anthony DeLuca, who has coordinated the logistics for this evening, bringing the musicians together. And Anthony also was part of the Newport location manager for the orchestra for HBO, which we'll be hearing from him shortly about his experience working as a part of the filming. Now, I think our artists are going to be tuning their instruments just a little while longer, and then we'll let the show begin. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Stickney, and I'm one of the two conductors you will see tonight. I am not going to say anything about that last piece, because I was not there when it was being performed in the show. I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Anthony DeLuca. You can read his bio in your program, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the experience of the Gilded Age here in Newport during the setting. So, Anthony.
Good evening. I'm genuinely shocked that nobody decided to get up and dance for the quadrille. I was really hoping some people in 17th century attire would come out. So before we begin my lecture portion, I need to announce that we have 4 substitutions this evening. The program books went in quite some time ago, and due to a combination of illness, U.S. Navy deployment, travel plans, and a personal issue, we have 4 musicians who are not listed on the program. So Kevin Kohler and Michael Simmons in the violin section have been replaced by Reese Ruljevich and Ethan Wood. And on viola, Daniel Dumont, who is enjoying his stay at the Navy base in Panama City right now, has been replaced by Thaisa Sokolova. And on cello, Matthew Knippel is probably watching this from Minnesota, and he has been replaced by Daniel Mello. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have 4 minutes to convey the following content. The entire life stories of Franz von Suppé and Johann Strauss II, the difference between an opera and an operetta, what a quadrille is, also how this music fits into the context of the Gilded Age and the Victorian era, plus the difference between modern instruments and 19th century instruments. Okay. I see some incredulous faces. Okay, obviously I can't do that in 4 minutes. My colleagues Mark and Chris probably can, but I can't, so I'll give you just the highlights. The first piece of music was the quadrille. It was the finale from the festival quadrille. It was written by the waltz king, Johann Strauss, and we all know him for his greatest hits: Blue Danube, Emperor Waltz, Thunder and Lightning Polka. But he has a very large repertoire of works under his name. That includes 1 opera, 15 operettas, 1 ballet, close to 500 waltzes, polkas, marches, and quadrilles. So I didn't realize that he had quite the body of work. But you've heard a quadrille, which people don't associate with Strauss. The tempo that you heard this piece taken was dance tempo. And for the next 2 pieces, Titania and Boccaccio, they'll also be at dance tempo. If you hear recordings of this, if you go on YouTube, a lot of times it's blazingly fast. Okay? That's not how it would have been presented in this context. These pieces were designed, people can get up and dance, and you don't want to leave the evening with a sprained ankle or have tripped and broken your nose or something. So, we're taking these all at dance tempo tonight. Quadrille, quadrille number 341, it premiered in Covent Garden in London in 1867. Now, anyone know what a quadrille actually is? Oh, I saw someone raise their hand over there. Okay. Okay, a quadrille, pop quiz. Quadrille is a dance that was fashionable in the late 18th and 19th century in Europe and colonies. It consists of a chain of 4 to 6 dances. It's performed by 4 couples. They dance in a rectangular formation, and it's related to American square dancing. There is a form of the quadrille called the Lancers, which is what you saw in the Gilded Age. And that became popular in the late 19th century, and it was still danced into the early 20th century in folk dance clubs. There's typically 5 to 6 movements in the quadrille. The finale was typically the most complex and the fastest. It required very precise timing. Okay. Excuse me. The upcoming piece is the Titania Waltz. It was written by the Austrian composer Franz von Suppé, who was famous for, anyone know? Overtures. Yes, we're playing a waltz by the person who's famous for overtures. Everyone knows his overtures: Morning, Noon, and Night in Vienna, Poet and Peasant, Queen of Spades, and Light Cavalry Overture. Although the bulk of his work has sunk into obscurity, his overtures have remained popular. But he's composed 30 operettas, 180 farces. Anyone know what a farce is? It's like actually, this is from a farce. It's something you see in vaudeville. A ballet, a mass, a symphony, many chamber works, string quartets, and other stage works. The librettos from his operettas were often heavily reworked, and in some cases have become almost unrecognizable. And that is actually the case for Boccaccio. There is no commercially available arrangement of Boccaccio. We had to go back to the original libretto, which was difficult to work from, and extract the music from that. So what you're hearing is as close as we could possibly get to the way that Franz von Suppé wrote it. Titania is from the operetta Trip Through Africa, written in 1883, which was towards the end of the golden age of Viennese operetta. It's a slapstick comedy involving groups of Europeans as they travel through North Africa. And if you ever have a chance to see it, it has some culturally inappropriate and elements that would not typically be found acceptable today. So, okay. Our final piece of the first 3 on the program is the Boccaccio Waltz. Boccaccio, or the Prince of Palermo, is an operetta in 3 acts by Franz von Suppé once again. It's based on a play by Jean-Francois Bayard and others, which is in turn based on the Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, premiered in Vienna in 1879. And I'll let you look at the background of it. Okay, so I'm running short on time. You didn't come here for a lecture. Oh, you did, actually, I'm sorry. But you didn't come here to hear me speak all evening. I will preface my remarks about the instruments with this. The musicians will be here after the concert. Please come up and speak to them. If you have questions about their instruments, how the modern instruments compare to their historic counterparts, they can answer those questions for you. But just briefly, I'll start with the strings. 19th century, gut strings. Okay? Actually, Ivan, if you saw, there was a close-up of Ivan in the Gilded Age. He got the close-up because Ivan did come out with gut strings for the show. And, he had to tune every, 45 seconds? Yes, but yes, he rated the close-up in the Gilded Age because of that. Also, some things that are found in modern instruments that were not in their 19th century counterparts. Neck rests. I'm not sure if anyone's using a neck rest. Reese has a neck rest. Can you show them, Reese? Chin rests were just coming into vogue. They had just been invented. Also, fine tuners. Anyone have fine tuners on their instruments? Yes. So these are all items that you won't see if you tune into the Gilded Age and scrutinize us. These were all removed from our instruments. On the woodwind section, any instruments that you see have fewer keys, generally pitched lower, and the brass were less complex instruments also. The horns that we used in the Gilded Age were actually, one of them was salvaged from a fire. They belonged to Kevin Owen, horn player in the Boston Symphony and Boston Pops. He let us borrow them. He was originally slated to be one of our horn players for the show. He couldn't make it, but one was salvaged from a fire. He rebuilt it. Second one is a historic instrument. So, take a look and you can see that they differ from the modern horns. Actually, yes. When was that built? Okay, that's not ancient, 1975, okay. But please, come up afterwards, speak to all the musicians, ask me about the production. It took place there. We spent a week in quarantine, 3 days in that room playing these 3 pieces. We're happy to discuss it. Thank you.
say the music world is a small world, and I went to graduate school with our next conductor, Chris Brellochs. Neither one of us, I think at that time, ever thought we would be doing something like this today here in a building like this. I was a wind band conductor, and he was a saxophone major. Well, it's okay, he's playing saxophone later, so probably he did imagine himself doing something like this. I, however, did not. And you can read his bio again, and I would like to, it is my pleasure to introduce the conductor for our next piece, Dr. Christopher Brellochs.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to first start with this. When I went on set, the prop master said, Dr. Brellochs, I have 2 batons that are original to the 19th century. Which would you prefer? And he opened them up, and I looked at them, and I said, I'll take the fanciest, please. And then when we finished filming, I said, may I take this or buy this off of you? And he said, no. So for the next 3 months, I scoured until I found my very own. Now, you'll notice that it's a little bit larger, and it's got these nice silver points to it. It's also substantially heavier. So about 2 weeks ago, I conducted a Viennese ball and conducted an orchestra doing dance music for 3 hours. At the end of that 3 hours, I had to pry my fingers away from the baton because it's a little bit heavier. So what was wonderful about being part of the Gilded Age production was the attention to detail. From everything as simple as the conductor's baton to the music that was selected. So John Knowles Paine is not a composer name that's particularly well known right now, but he was a big deal in 1880. He was a Boston composer, considered one of the Boston Six, along with other composers like Amy Beach, Arthur Foote, and others. And it was premiered in Boston, and it was so wildly popular that people took out their handkerchiefs and were waving them. So we're going to be doing 2 movements, excerpts from 2 movements. Like most symphonies, it's a 4-movement work. In the series, we started with the second movement, which is what we'll do this evening. And for those of you, if I could paint the picture, it's not exactly the same, but the character of Bertha Russell comes down the staircase in a long, flowing red gown. So you hear the music start. So you're gonna hear that music, and it's called May Night Fantasy. It's what's called programmatic music. There's 2 kinds of music. There's what's called absolute music, where you have something just called Symphony Number 2 in A major, which is this is called. That would be absolute. It doesn't give you any non-music information to understand what the composer was thinking in terms of emotions. But then John Knowles Paine adds the programmatic side, something poetic that gives you a hint as to what kind of emotions he was thinking of when he composed it, May Night Fantasy. So Bertha Russell comes down, she's got the beautiful red gown, she's off to hear John Knowles Paine conduct the Boston Symphony Orchestra. John Knowles Paine conducted the Boston Symphony Orchestra in 1881. He was their first guest conductor. So the timing of 1882, which is when season 1 takes place, is perfect. Now, as I mentioned before, the symphony was so popular, the crowd went wild. They were waving their handkerchiefs. We want you to get your handkerchiefs ready, please. A scarf will do. At the end of the second movement, please, wave your handkerchief, clap loudly. This is not like a stuffy where you're not allowed to clap between movements. We want you to wave your handkerchief and clap at the end of the second movement. We'll then go, after your wild applause subsides, to the third movement, which takes place after intermission in the series, where one of the main characters, Marion Brooke, sees her love interest talking to another woman in an adjacent box at the Academy of Music. And you see for the first time on her face that maybe she's really worried. All the while, you hear this absolutely gorgeous music. And listen in particular to the horn solo. If we could have the French horn hold up the French horn, listen to that in the third movement. It's going to soar, and in this room, it's going to soar over the ceiling and surround you, and it's going to be really magnificent. And if you can picture that scene of this beautiful, it's called a romance of springtime. It's a romance, but if you look at the main character's face, it's a romance that there's troubled waters. So with that, John Knowles Paine, Symphony No. 2.
There's a lot of different people's notes up here. Got to find the right ones so I don't talk about something completely different. First of all, I was hearing Chris talk a lot about how the authentic Gilded Age baton he was using, which I don't know how he uses that. And I felt kind of awkward because mine was made by a guy in Ohio, and it's made out of fishing rod, and it was made about 5 years ago. So it's definitely not Gilded Age authentic baton. If you get the wow of the, before I go to that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the work that I do with Historic Music of Newport. It was founded officially in 2022, but it has been a project of mine since going back as early as 2000. During that time, I worked part-time for this Preservation Society for about 10 years. I was putting myself through school and also ran production for what was then called the Newport Music Festival. And just being here in these houses, studying music with the concerts, but also with the events and the parties and the music at that, it didn't bother me, but it made me wonder why there was really no work done on what was played here, what was played in Newport, and who were those musicians. We know who the famous people who might have come to Newport. Miles Davis apparently played a concert at someone's house once. I'm still trying to find out whose house that was and what he played, and also what else happened there. But to date, have cataloged over 900 pieces of music with Newport origins. Those pieces were composed in Newport, they were written about Newport, or composed by Newporters. We are also continuing to research the more than 600 musicians who have lived in Newport. These musicians served at Fort Adams in the various artillery bands there and infantry bands during the Civil War, including children drummers, who during the battles would become stretcher bearers. I've seen a few pictures of them, which I'm going to share when I get the right moment. It's just no 14-year-old child should have that look in their eyes. To also musicians of the Naval Training Station, which just had bands going back into the mid-1800s, and to this day still has the Navy Band Northeast, which is a wonderful ensemble. They came to Newport from all over the world. They were also born in Newport. Telling their stories is one of the main reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. If you got your wow of the day today, I think it mentioned it was someone's birthday. On March 2nd, 1877, Consuelo Vanderbilt was born. And don't look at your program because this is not in your program. We'd like to play a little piece in her honor. The strings are going to take it away for us in a second. It's called the Marlborough Waltz. If you were at my lecture in July, we talked a little bit about that. It was composed by a New Hampshire native named Emma Howe, who studied at the New England Conservatory. She wrote the waltz, for Consuelo's birthday to the Duke of Marlborough. And we know how that ended. So if you just got married, don't close your ears. You don't want to hear this waltz. So the strings are now going to play Emma Howe's Marlborough Waltz. Happy birthday, Consuelo, wherever you are. I do have to mention that that piece was actually written for piano, and with Anthony DeLuca's help, we were able to arrange that for the strings. The next piece is Newport's origins are pre-Gilded Age, so we're stepping back further into the 1850s, where Newport was pre-Civil War, also a place to be, mostly for Southern families. So you see where I'm going, why that stopped with the Civil War. There was a party at Chateau in 1857, at Chateau Samara, given by William Wetmore, hosted for his friend George Peabody. And I am horrible at French. After 9 years of French, I will still butcher this. The Fête Champêtre. That was a concert that was given by the Germania Musical Society. The Germania Musical Society was an orchestra of about this size, maybe slightly larger, made up of similar instruments that came over from Germany and to live the American dream and perform. They were based out of the Northeast. They performed all over the country. And in 1850, they were listed as residents of the Ocean House Hotel in Newport, if you look at the census, which is now where Stop and Shop and is in Newport. The main part of this concert, there's a great article online that I linked tomorrow you can do by a scholar at Rhode Island College about this party. There were 3 pieces performed in the party, and then they would take a break, they would eliminate the chairs, and then they would dance the night away. A lot of the music was original. There was an original march written for that party, which was the first piece of music I found the name of, and 20 years later, a piece of music that sadly doesn't exist, I don't think. But I will not give up looking for that. But the first piece of said performance was this Coronation March. We're going to now hear an incredible saxophone solo, and I will let him talk a little bit about that. We're going to welcome back Dr. Christopher Brellochs.
Thank you, everyone. So when you look at this instrument, what style of music do you think of? Long before jazz was a glimmer in anyone's eye, it was a classical instrument. It was invented in the 1840s. And if we know our history, we know jazz didn't really come about until the beginning of the 20th century. So that's a good 50 years of working out. The saxophone became one of the most popular instruments in the United States during the 1920s. But that didn't just come out of nowhere. The Gilded Age is really a coming-of-age story for this instrument. And it was experimented with by all sorts of composers, from French opera composers like Jules Massenet and Georges Bizet. They wrote for the saxophone. English composers like Ralph Vaughan Williams later on wrote for the saxophone. It was taught at the Paris Conservatory of Music in the 1850s by its inventor, Adolphe Sax. And it spread across here to the United States. A famous French saxophonist named Edouard Lefebvre came over to the United States with a mission to demonstrate the unique capabilities of this new and exciting instrument. And he met a composer by the name of Carol Florio. Carol Florio was an English immigrant. He came to the United States when he was 15 years old. His parents had been told by the doctor that their son was very ill, and the only thing that would cure it is a good sea voyage. If you're going to do a sea voyage, let's make it a good one. So they came here to the United States. And lo and behold, he was cured. He went on to stay in New York City and eventually become a composer. And in 1879, wrote the first piece for solo saxophone and orchestra, which we're going to perform for you this evening. Now, this concert held here in the Breakers, with the music we're performing, has a very Vanderbilt connection. You heard the Marlborough Waltz. Carol Florio went on to work for another famous Vanderbilt. He worked for George Vanderbilt at the Biltmore Street as his music director. So this piece laid the groundwork for his further success as a composer in residence for George Vanderbilt. So, without further ado, some of our friends in the front row are going to get, I have to just say, it's a good thing it's not a trombone for your safety.
We can't let you go yet. Who is the most famous? Well, first of all, thank you to Trudy, Leslie, Kate, everyone at the Preservation Society for allowing us to come play in their house tonight. A little concert for the masses. Who is the most popular composer at the end of the 19th century, and one of the most popular performers was a man by the name of John Philip Sousa, who wrote more than just marches. He wrote a lot of other music, but we all know him for his marches. Those marches were all encores for other pieces that they would play. And I always try to do a fact about Sousa that nobody knows. We all know he was in the Marines and led the Marine Band, but he was recalled during the World War II era to the Navy and retired as a lieutenant commander in the Navy, as well as his retirement as a sergeant major in the Marine Corps. We're going to end with one of his more popular marches called the Washington Post March.
We really love to set the bar high for Thursday nights. Thank you all. Thank you so much to the orchestra for a truly breathtaking performance, and how very Gilded Age it is of us to have our guests here and our staff watching from the balconies. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. This is just our first taste of entering into musical programming, so we hope that you enjoyed yourselves and that you'll encourage us to do more of these. We welcome you now to join us for a reception out on the terrace. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for your support.